Let's talk for a moment, and we do want to get to questions from the folks in the audience. And let's also recognize that this is the beginning of a conversation. This isn't the only conversation. If this is the only conversation that you have in this community this week, this month, this year about safety, then we have not succeeded. This should be an ongoing conversation. And in that regard, let's talk about, as leaders, not just in our positions on the set, but as leaders in the industry, how do we empower those on the crew that are more vulnerable, whether it be women who have been historically abused, and the Me Too movement certainly highlights that, PAs that are first on the set and last off, actors who I think we often don't think about, but they trust us to know the technical stuff and to know the safety, and they're in our hands. So how do we communicate and build systems that protect and empower the people who are just getting into the business, or younger in their career, or are in positions where they inherently don't have the kind of power and influence on set?
Well, I'd say the first thing we have to do is stick up for one another. That if somebody's having an issue or they're in danger, that we speak on their behalf. A lot of people, when they're new to the industry, they are very hesitant to complain about anything, be it long hours or be it unsafe conditions, because they don't want to lose work opportunities. Particularly, I think, speaking as an old person, when you're young, you're indestructible and you feel like you'll survive anything, and you don't want to say something, but the people who are around them with experience really have an obligation to speak up and to say, this is a wrongful situation. And if one person says it, that empowers everybody else to say something too. It's the first person to speak up. That's always the scariest one. And everybody after that is confirming what somebody's already said, and that's incredibly helpful. That's what puts enough weight on it that changes are made.
It's literally safety in numbers. Yeah. That said, I have to point out that it's been 20 years since Brent Hirschman. Tracy, what did you work on last, or not what did you work on, but what was your schedule like on the last shoot you were on?
In 2017 I did 2 20-hour days. The longest day I've ever done was like 28 hours. 28 in one day, so.
Everybody knows that wrong. How do we fix it?
First of all, I want to point out that, in Europe, they don't have this problem, right? I mean, you work 12 hours and you go home. You have to negotiate with the crew for overtime. They want to be home for dinner with their family, and it's expected. So I don't know how they evolved that culture, and we've got this dysfunctional one here. I would joke with my family, I'm going off to the coal mines, because I always felt like, it was that type of a job. Sometimes you go when it's dark and you leave, it's dark. And it's really, I don't know what the answer is, I guess, but I think it's incremental, I suppose, at this point. The only concession I feel like that the industry has made in those 20 years since Brent died is that finally on crews, the production managers are supposed to say to any crew members, if you don't feel you can drive home safely, we will get you a hotel room. That's as far as it's gotten, and that's only after 14 hours. Like it wasn't 12. 12 was too few hours, but 14 hours they could say that, in my experience. So that's the only concession that I've seen. I think you just have to keep raising it, and hopefully you can make some progress. I mean, I don't know.
And sadly, that minor concession you talk about,
yeah.
I was there when that was put in the contracts, and that was 5 days of discussion that was followed by a strike threat in order for the producers to come up with language that said, if you don't feel like it's safe to drive home, that you'll either get housing or somebody will drive you home. And even right. That's woefully inadequate, because oftentimes, if for example, you're the loader, you're the last one out, everybody else is gone. Who are you going to go to ask for that ride home or that hotel room? But it was very hard to even get that language in. It's a start, and as far as union shows are concerned, In April, there's another contract negotiation that'll cover the contract for the next 3 years, and many of the proposals on the table have to do with limiting work hours, increasing the overtime rate, enlarging the penalties for skipped meals. And this, we all have to stand together to make that happen. And internal to my union, I know everybody here is not a union member, but it's going to require everybody in the industry to get together and say, we insist on these things changing for them to change. It's not enough for the leadership to go in and fight for it at the table, because the leadership is only as powerful as the people they represent. And it's going to take, and some of those things are going to take threatening to stop work, which is a really hard thing to do. People can't afford to take time off of work, but it may be what's necessary to institute the kind of change you're talking about, because the culture is so ingrained in long hours, and it's it's very possible. There's filmmakers out there now. We were talking about this earlier. Steve Soderbergh, Clint Eastwood, who work 8-hour days, and they make perfectly good, successful movies. And in Europe, I don't even think people I know who work in Europe, they don't even work 12-hour days. There's this concept of French hours, which in the United States means not eating lunch. But in France, it's because they work 9 hours and they go home. They'd rather eat at home. But they're not there for 14 hours first. They're not actually skipping a meal. They're just taking, they know their day is going to be short, and they can be flexible about the meal within that day, because they'll eventually get to go home, and they're having a long meal break in the middle. We just don't do that.
Well, I think if you're a union member, I think you have to be in touch with your BAs, with all the higher ups, with your reps, and let them know that you want shorter hours, that you want more penalties. I said something to Peter this morning, and it kind of goes to that, and he's telling me, well, we do these surveys, and it comes out half and half, like half the members want
More
shorter
overtime.
hours and half of them want more. And I don't know who those people are, because when I talk to people on set,
I'll give you names.
Okay, I want them. I want names because I'm calling them. Seriously, I'll call them. Because when I talk to people on set, everybody's like, I have kids. I want to go to my kids. I don't have kids, but I just want to go home. And it's a weird thing to me, because I hear that not just from you. I hear that from people in my union. I'm in a separate union. I'm in local 600, the Cinematographers Guild, and they tell me the same thing. And I'm like, I don't know who these people are, because everybody that I know would like to go home early. And I don't know what set you're on, but the sets I'm on, nobody wants to do that. So, I mean, I'm sure you have the spreadsheets or whatever to back that up, but it's just not my reality. And it's really going to come down to those of us that want shorter hours have to put pressure on people like Peter, or my BA's name is Justin. I've got to put pressure on Justin, that when they go into these things, to stand up for us and all of our officers. That's going to kind of be where it starts, I think.
Everybody okay?
And let me to clarify, I would love to have the days be short. I personally would be happy to walk. The way my local before my local got started, I was on a TV movie here in town, and we were all working on a flat, and the days, got longer and longer and longer. We were starting to work 14-hour days, which at that time was like a really long day. Right. But with inflation now, it's nothing. And Mike Wiesner and I basically led a crew walkout, and we said, if you're not going to compensate us, we don't want to work these super long hours. It's not only decreasing our pay rate, but it's dangerous and painful. And we were effective, and the days were reduced, and we all got a little bit of cash in an envelope if we would shut up. As a result, Darrell Wilson, who's here, and I and a group of our colleagues put together a union local here so that we could make it so that individuals didn't have to do that for themselves. But in that local, I have a responsibility to represent everybody. But for me personally, I never want to work that long. I would be perfectly happy to work on a show that's 8 hours every day, and I'd prefer a big chunk of that be lunchtime.
Because my thing is, I'm not going to say I've never heard people say they want more overtime, but I always think to myself, what kind of world do you live in that you are in a union and you're getting higher wages and health insurance and pension provided to you? And on a union contract, the first 8 hours is straight time, and then 8 to 12 is guaranteed overtime. And since most set days are 12 hours, I just think to myself, like, what exactly are you doing that you're working that many hours at this wage and this much overtime already? Like, you're already getting 4 hours of overtime every day. Like, I don't know that I've ever worked less than a 60-hour week, even on the really good shows. So what exactly are you doing that you cannot survive on those wages? And just because you can't financially manage yourself, do the rest of us have to suffer for that? Like, that's kind of my takeaway of that. Like, what are you doing? Like, you know, I mean, I know kids are expensive. Trust me, I get that, but like, holy crap.
I have a question. So we're talking about the union side of things, but what about those people, those crew members who are non-union that are working, that feel like they have to work the abusive hours, and they don't have the same rights that everybody that's union has? And I know I get asked the question all the time, well, okay, that's good for union members, but what about the non-union members who are still working towards those union days that don't feel like they have that option? What is in place for them, or the protection that they have?
Well, there is OSHA, which exists in this state and everywhere in the country, that you can contact the OSHA offices, and if there's a safety hazard on set, they will come out and investigate, sometimes quickly. The union will actually, even on a non-union show, if somebody calls me up and says there's a dangerous situation, I'll come out. I'm happy to do that, and I know that other people would be as well, to investigate that situation. In terms of overtime and meals, again, there's the Tennessee and the federal government have a wage and hour division. You can call them and you can say, hey, you know, we're working 14 hours and we're not being paid anything extra for it, and they will come out and fix that. And if they don't, they'll fix it afterwards, and the producer who has convinced you that it makes sense to work for the same rate for 16 hours that you agreed to do for 10, they will tell that producer they have to pay you overtime. And that has nothing to do with the union. That has to do with some of the good things that government actually does for us. And I recommend that. And the other thing I'll just add, because it's different in different locals, but first of all, the union contracts, if you're working on those movies, they apply whether you're a member or not. And so you'll get those protections whether or not you join. And second of all, if you're on a show and you do want to join, there's no barrier to joining here in Tennessee. You can just come in and join. We're not going to require you to work a certain number of days, at least in my local. On shows that the budget is too low or it's inappropriate for union contract, on student films and things, that's a whole separate issue, and that you have to either rely on governmental protection, or you have to rely on all the people you're working with to stick up for each other.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a couple of things that I want to comment on. One is in Haskell Wexler's documentary, he actually goes and talks to OSHA. It's interesting because he has a whole argument with them about the issue of time, and they say, you know, it's actually, they don't cover that one area, even though common sense tells you this is a safety hazard if people are exhausted on sets, but in fact, they don't have any say about how long somebody works on a set. The issue of pay certainly would be something you could appeal for. I think the same tactics that unions use in terms of negotiating is really a good lesson. I mean, somebody once told me that if you read that a union contract is really a history of abuses, which is a kind of cynical way of looking at it, but I think it's also true. It's like when producers start abusing a crew in certain ways, and the next time the contract comes up, those are the issues that are on the table. And so that whole idea of negotiating certain things up front, I think is really important. So I know frequently people are hired individually, but prior to production, if somebody will sit down, somebody will say, let's have a representative of the crew go talk to the producers again and say, what are the guidelines? How are we going to address meals? How are we address overtime? How are we address turnaround? and start up by saying we'd like to follow the basic industry practice with those. And then at least you have a starting place, so if they're not meeting you there, you may be able to then to come back and say, hey, this is what we talked about, and now it's not happening. But I think that whole idea of setting those rules up front may be a way to go with that.
Well, and education is a great thing. I mean, this event is sort of an overview and a discussion, but there are specific safety classes that are available all over the place. So I mean, we offer some, but there's ones that are generally for the community, and I'm hoping to have more of those soon. There's education that needs to be had in terms of how wage and hour rules work, how health insurance works, how all of these factors work. And the more that people are educated, the more they can stick up for themselves on a set. And protect themselves and know what the hazards are.
Well, and one thing is, if you start speaking up, it does make it easier for other people to speak up. Now, I did not hear this comment, but it was relayed to me later, so I'll tell the story. So I would maybe comment before the Sarah Jones accident, but after that, I'm very vocal about, we work long hours, we've done this, or I don't care. Fire me, don't hire me, I don't care. I still work a lot, so it's obviously not hurting me that much. And I don't do a lot of music videos anymore, but on the last one that I did, there was talk of extending, we'd already done like 14 or 15 hour days, of extending it to add this other thing the director had just thought of. And they were debating about whether to keep us for overtime or bring us back for like a half day the next day after everybody slept. And someone on the crew told me afterwards that they heard the producer and director talking, and the producer said, no, we're just going to have to bring everybody back for a half day. Because Tracy's here and she's just going to make a big thing, and we might as well just and just come back tomorrow and save a lot of time. Good. I am so glad that happened. My work here is done. Let's go. And we didn't even have to argue about it. They just looked over and said, she's not going to agree to that. Let's go. And so we did. Great. And I am happy to be known to be that person.
And we're happy to have you do that.
Yeah.
And I have to say this for those people who are producers or directors. If you're a producer and a director, and I have produced but I have not directed, the production phase is a limited part of your life. On a music video, for example, you might spend weeks putting together a proposal and a budget and a plan and building a set, and then you have weeks of post-production and working out a release, and if it's a film, and marketing and editing and all this stuff that you have to do. Your production phase could be as short as a day, it could be several weeks, but then so you can work as a director or a producer as hard as you need to during that production phase and get as exhausted as you want. And then you go home and you go on to these other things which involve a lot of telephone calls and sitting in an office. For the people who work on the set, the production phase is their entire life. And so they're not just doing one 20-hour day for this one project. They're doing 20-hour days every day for their entire lives. And you have to be respectful of that and not just figure, well, I'm going to use myself up to my capacity, and therefore the people around me should do the same thing, because they're not doing the same job that you're doing, and they have to do it. They have to do the hard part more. That's all.
We'd like to open the floor up to audience questions and comments. Yes, sir.
First, I was just stretching. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Something that really struck me at the top of this was a comment about the culture of it all. And what's amazing to me is that, and my name's Ian Quinn, I'm a stunt coordinator, and it seems in my experience that over the years we've been doing this, that we go through the walking and talking all day, and then let's hurry up and shoot the dangerous stuff. We have an hour left. Let's get out there and do all the dangerous stuff. And everybody's exhausted and tired. And something that really struck me, this was about a year ago when we were doing Sun Records in Memphis. And it had been a really, really tough day for the crew. Not for the stunt crew. We had tested our cars. We went through what we were going to do. We'd rehearsed a little bit, and we spent a lot of time laying around on our stunt pads and drinking lemonade. And the crew, I watched them. I go to set quite a bit, and I watched the crew, and they had really worked hard. It was 98 degrees out, 99% humidity. They had been outside all day long. And it was getting near that point where we were going to do a near-miss car sequence, a lot of cars spinning, sliding, close camera angles on it. And Tracy walked by me when I was sitting on my stunt pad, and she looked at me, and she said, "I know, Ian, you're going to keep us safe out there tonight." I've never forgotten that. It was one of the best compliments I've ever gotten as a stunt coordinator. But that really put my antenna up another 3 feet. Going out, and remember, I broomed everybody back even further. I said, okay, no, you can't be here. Get back there, go back, go to Cleveland and film, So that really struck it. And that says something. People can say stuff to other departments, like, hey, are you ready for this? When I do a safety meeting, I ask at the end of it, and I learned it from another stunt coordinator, I ask at the very end of it, does anybody at all have a comment, a question, or a concern? Craft service, electric, grip, anybody. I want to hear it now. And what everybody's talking about here is about the inclusiveness of it. And that's really important. And I thank you for that comment that night. And we got some good shots that night, too. But boy, that crew had worked hard all day in the heat. So the other thing, too, last thing I'll say is that it's about the hours is very true. But 10 hours out in the ocean on a boat can be a lot rougher than 14, 15 hours in an air-conditioned studio. So it's not just the number of hours, but what you're doing in those hours. That's a really important part of it. So thanks, everybody, for being here.
Hi. So a couple of you had mentioned being in situations and thinking back about it, saying, I wish I had said something, or something similar. And many of us work in the independent world, and so we don't have those the securities that you were talking about. What are some red flags before you even get into a situation that you can find out? I know, like, even myself personally, like working with certain producers or directors, you get into it and you're like, yeah, I knew this was gonna be this type of situation. What are some red flags that before you even say yes to a project, that particular things that maybe you have experienced or that we should look out for to not even get involved in a situation where you know that people aren't concerned about protecting you?
Well, I would start by calling other people and checking the references, so to speak. I mean, employers always check references on employees, but it can go the other direction too. So-and-so wants to do a music video or asking me if I'll work on it. What's that person's reputation in town? What's it been like working for that person before? As far as red flags go, as an AD, I'd say if you get a call sheet and it has anything on it like a stunt, and you don't see all the things that you would expect to be there, like a stunt coordinator, stunt doubles, a safety bulletin attached, a medic, exactly, or a fireman if that's called for. If you don't see those things on the call sheet, that's a red flag. And somebody hasn't prepped it well, somebody hasn't thought their way through it, and somebody's not stepping into that situation knowing what they're doing. So that's one thing you can kind of look prior to just getting on the set. Yeah.
But I think, you mean more, Sandra, you mean more like what can you ask before you even get to the call sheet phase?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking? A general lack of information. Like when you're asking, well, okay, what's the rate? Oh, well, we'll get back to you. I mean, that's already a red flag. If they don't know a lot of things and they say they'll get back to you, but then they don't, and you have to follow up yourself, like that to me is generally a red flag. I'm sure there's tons of things in the moment that happen. I can't think of them offhand.
Well, for me, I mean, this is crossing over into a different area, but on a film that's not a student film, but is an independent film, if they expect you to work as an independent contractor, which is sadly relatively common, that right away is a flag that One, they're not following the law. Two, they're not providing you with any insurance. And those two things should give you pause. And I know it's expensive it's not expensive to provide workers' comp, it's pretty cheap. Having a payroll company is expensive, but you don't have to have one in order to have employees. But it requires knowing something to do that. And what I always say about film is it's a collaborative art. It requires multiple skilled people to make a movie. And if all you want to do is express yourself, you can paint, you can sing, there's a million things you can do. But if you want to make a movie and you're going to get other people involved in it, there's certain minimum standards you have to meet. And I think one of those things is to provide a safe work environment, not just in terms of what happened, how you keep people from getting hurt, which is really important and what most of this meeting is about, but also what happens if somebody does get hurt. We saw at the beginning of this, I know there were technical problems, and I know they rehearsed, they practiced, we'd done it this morning, and everything went well, but things go wrong. So when something goes wrong, how is that company going to help you? And the simple answer is, workers' comp insurance or other kinds of liability insurance that will help you when you're injured. On bigger shows, there's obviously more they can do, but that to me is kind of a minimum standard. And if you want your friends to volunteer to work with you and everybody's sort of pitching in, or you're doing a student project, things are a little bit different, but on a student project, the film school has insurance that covers people. So there's this area where you're no longer doing a student project, you're not yet doing a big budget project, but the people are still people, and they're still fragile, and there's still accidents that happen. And there needs to be something put in place to protect those people. And again, the short answer to that is they've hired you as an employee and not as an independent contractor.
I wanted to say something about that. One thing that I've learned through the whole process is, I know for us, when we start a job, you start running as soon as you get there. You don't fill out your paperwork, and you put it off until like the end of the week. I've started telling people, as soon as you get the job, you get that paperwork filled out immediately. Don't lift a finger to do anything until all of that is done. Why? Because you can get hurt as soon as you walk out the door, and they can say, oh, well, you're not an employee, or you don't work with us, because there's no documents there to show that you're an employee, or that you're working with the film. And that's something that I found out during the process with this whole Midnight Rider tragedy. I filled out my paperwork the day that it happened, pretty much. It was like, it wasn't right away. And I remember that when I got there, I started working. And then it hit me, you know what, I didn't fill out my paperwork yet. So before I would do anything else, I let my department head know, you know what, I'm not doing anything else until I get this paperwork filled out. So I sat there and filled it out. And literally, that same evening, that's when everything happened. And they could have used that against me if I didn't fill out the paperwork. Oh, well, she wasn't even an employee. So I tell people all the time, especially when I'm at work now, because that's something that's a practice that is being done that people don't really think about until it's too late. And then you don't want to have to deal with workers' comp, because I'm still, as of today, dealing with workers' comp, and it's 4 years later.
And Joyce, that brings something else up. That wasn't really a shoot day, right? It was supposed to be, this is happening a lot more
Right.
too. And when this happens, it sends up a red flag for me. That it's like the prep day, and they said, oh, and we're going to do a camera test. But then you get there and you shoot a scene.
Right.
And
Right.
and that's a way to get around some of the things, because if you're doing a stunt, which this train thing obviously would have been, you're supposed to have a medic.
Right. And there wasn't a
And there
medic.
wasn't a
There
medic.
wasn't any of that around.
I can't remember the last
So-
time I started a show on day one, actually.
I know, it's like you start before. And that's kind of the thing, if they want you to do a bunch of things before. And it's kind of the thing.
Right.
That have been a stunt.
On a train.
Yeah.
I would consider it a stunt. Is it not?
Well, generally speaking, you're gonna know the day before that they're planning on shooting something. You should have at least 24 hours.
Yeah, but I've been on support literally at the camera prep. They're like, oh, go get a camera, we're gonna do this. So, you know, that's kind of becoming more and more common. I mean, and that was the thing too, that it wasn't really even a shoot day that you guys were shooting.
Hey, Mike, here's one for you in particular along those lines. How do we, going on to a new set, let's say as performers, or for that matter, crew who can be endangered too, let's say the independent production says, oh yeah, we got a stunt coordinator. How do we know that it's really a stunt coordinator, someone qualified like yourself versus, you know, a guy, or you know, usually a guy, but some guy that maybe they've done some stunt work, but they're not really qualified as a coordinator?
This day and age, the easiest way to do that is IMDb them. The easiest way to do that is you IMDb them. You know, if they have, you know, 6 credits as a stunt coordinator on some stuff that you have never heard of that was shot in Bulgaria, and they're coordinating a car chase, you know, you're gonna. It's just common sense. And it does happen in every department. You know, hey, you know what, you know, the producer's neighbor's son, you know, he was a martial artist in high school and he loved to, you know, be your fight coordinator on this. Boom, he's the fight coordinator. In the United States, there is no qualification for being a stunt player or a stunt coordinator. There is in the UK, there's in Australia, but there is not in the United States. So if you're going to be closely involved with something like that that's going on, especially in the stunt department, you want to check out who that person is that's coordinating the stunts and looking out for your safety. And that goes as well as special effects, which is something I do. If I'm going to be involved with something where we're running from an explosion, who's the special effects guy? And luckily, in this day and age, I can call up people, I know enough people, and say, hey, tell me, how did this guy do? You know, is he a good guy? And that goes with stunt players that I hire too. I like to give new people a chance, but I want to check them out and say, who did you work for? What did you do? Show me a demo reel. And the first reason I do that is for safety for that person and myself, and also being able to give the production a great stunt with someone that's qualified to do it.
So it's after 9. We can't pay anyone here overtime, but I wanted to ask if you guys are okay with just taking one more audience question. Is that all right? His hand went up first.
My name is Robert Duke. I'm a key grip here in town. One of the things I wanted to touch on that you kind of brought up a little bit is that, and it's something that I see more and more younger crew doing, is before call, before they're on the clock, starting to work. And that's something that we all should watch out for, because when you're not on the clock, you're not covered by the production's insurance. You are essentially freelancing and you're not actually being covered by their insurance. So that's something also to watch out for yourself, other people, other departments, because they may not know it and they may go to the end of the lift gate and a cart falls on them, and then suddenly you're not an employee, you're not covered, you're not on workers' comp.
And it may be that
Or you have to lay there on the ground with a cart on top of you for 15 minutes until call time and then call for help.
Right.
and you may be working before the medic's
And neither of
present.
those are very
Yeah.
pleasant options, so.
So I do want to end by giving Joyce the mic one more time. Before I do that, can you give us just some closing remarks? In a moment, but first, I want to first thank everyone for coming. You know, this is hosted by Nashville Filmmakers Guild, by Watkins, and iSafe, but many other organizations in town help spread the word. So I want to encourage you, if you would like to be a member of the Nashville Filmmakers Guild, it's for a donation, so you can give $2 and become a member. That gets you on the email list and things like that, so we encourage that. But you know what? If you're a member of your own group, if you want to sign up for the Local 600 or for the union or for some other group. NFG is not exclusivist, so by all means, the whole point is just get connected and let's work together and let's keep each other safe. So thank you to all the groups who helped spread the word. Thank you to everyone who gave their time. I passed around some sign-up sheets. If you'd like to be aware of events that Nashville Filmmakers Guild hosts, we've done panels like this on diversity. We did a Me Too panel. We're trying to bring people of all different types together so that we're stronger together. And so that we can do bigger and better projects and also find success in our careers, right? We want to pay our bills too. We want to support our families. So let's get in that together. Mark, anything else you want to add? T-shirts.
Yes, so there is a merch table. $10 donation gets you an iSafe t-shirt. We have some other t-shirts. Tracy, I'm not sure that we got that raffle going. Did anyone, as you came in, did we ask you to do that? So we may have to find another opportunity to give those shirts away. But we do have shirts, and Joyce described the importance of those shirts and wearing them on set, and they're available at a donation that's discounted from what they're offered on the website. And again, and I guess I'll stay.
Free stickers at the merch table.
Woo! Free stickers at the merch table. And
Compliments of Local 600.
thank you to Local 600, and just my personal thanks for all of you being here. This was something that just Joyce has described to me that this has become a calling for her to spread safety awareness. And I think we recognize there are times when, whether you consider yourself a religious person or not, that a calling comes upon you, that you are the person in the place, at the time, at the moment, to make a difference. And I think there's no more important time or place to make a difference on set than when safety, life, and health are at stake. So let's all take that as part of our calling going forward. That's just what I wanted to share from my heart on this, and thank you again for all being here. And let's leave it in Joyce's capable hands.
I'm just going to piggyback on what they said. Thank you for coming out to the event tonight. And please, let's continue the conversation to spread safety awareness on sets in the communities, and just let everyone know about iSafe, and so that we can have this as an annual event on February 20th, iSafe Day. And just please support as much as you can and just share with everyone. And let's continue to have panel discussions like this, because what we're finding out now is the more we discuss it, the more it's going to be in people's hearts, minds, and the more people will be aware and not afraid to speak up when they're on set or feel like they're unsafe situations. So I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart, and let's just continue to work, be safe, and go home.
Thank you. Thank you to our panel. Thank you. Hang around the merch table, fellowship with your friends and colleagues a little bit if you'd like, and safe travels home.